Hello everyone, welcome to Dr. Prim's Thought Space. I am Primrose Jikomborero Joylin Bima and I create content about research, career development and wellness. In today's video, I'm going to be going down memory lane, reflecting on the challenges that I experienced during the course of my PhD journey. Now, I just want to put it out there to say that I'm someone who does not like framing what she goes through as challenges or disastrous experiences. However, for the sake of comprehension, I do think that what I'm going to be talking about today qualifies to be categorized as challenges. And this conversation was also prompted by a discussion I was having with a colleague a few weeks back when we were just sharing some of the challenges that we faced during the course of our PhD journeys. And I thought this would be an opportune time to actually share this, via YouTube for the listeners as well as the viewers, because one of the challenges I actually faced was not being able to find people that could relate to what I was going through, not being able to find people that could share struggle stories that would perhaps resonate and help me to feel at ease at the time. So for those of you that are in the PhD trenches, for those of you that are going to be pursuing their PhDs in the near future, or, the further future, if there's such a thing, I think that this is a video that is worth watching. And of course, for those of us that have already gone through our own struggles, if you'd like to share, add on some points, feel free to do so via the comments section. And before I proceed, I just want to say that I'm someone who highly acknowledges her privileges. So this might not be something that sounds like a disastrous struggle story. However, like I said, these were some of the key challenges that I experienced, and I think that they are worth noting. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to first of all look down and just give you the pointers as to what I'll be talking about today so that you've got a sense of direction, and then of course grab a pen, whatever it is that you use to jot down notes so that you can take down the notes. My voice is a bit raspy. I was at a 2-day wedding, so yeah, the screams, the shouts, the everything stole my voice away, but that cannot stop us from creating content. Okay, so the first one is going to be about money. The second key point is going to be about career sacrifices. The third one is linked to that. It's about career coaching. The fourth one is around COVID-19 because I experienced a lot of my PhD challenges during the COVID-19 period from 2020 through to 2021. And then the next key point would be around peer support. And the last point will be around being a super person. All right, so let's speak about the first point, money. Money is important for a lot of reasons, if not everything. So foremost, I had a PhD scholarship for international and refugee students from the University of Cape Town, but it only covered tuition. So basically the fees required for one to register and become a PhD candidate. And I decided to go full scale into my PhD after defending my proposal in the second year, which meant that I had to quit my job. I left Harare with 500 rands in hand, an Intercape bus ticket, which my parents had paid for, and it was only for the journey from Harare Road Port to, of course, Johannesburg Park Station. While on that trip, I was editing. Of course, that was a business that I had started a few years back, and the money I was going to get from what I was editing on the bus was going to be for my onward journey, my air ticket from Johannesburg to Cape Town. I did not have accommodation in Cape Town at the time, but an aunt had, invited me to stay at her house for a few days to some weeks. So I basically left Harare with hope and no financially solid plan. I had offers to become a teaching assistant, but the tragedy with that is that the money would only come perhaps, up to 2 months after I had settled at the University of Cape Town. So again, that was a challenge. Okay, so let's go back. My PhD started in 2018. I first registered in April of 2018, and although I was working at the time, I had just started a new job. My salary in Zimbabwe was not enough to fund anything that I required. So my flight ticket from Harare to Johannesburg, and then Johannesburg to Cape Town, both of those were covered for by my father. Flight tickets, because I did not have leave days on paper that allowed for me to travel by road. So we had to make that ultimate sacrifice. I was still on probation. I used to gain, I think, about 2 to 3 leave days per month. So flying was going to be the most efficient way to get to the University of Cape Town, register, meet with my supervisor, and then come back. And I also made sure that I went to register around a public holiday season in Zimbabwe so that I could capitalize on that extra day. So you can already see that my journey started on an aided basis. And then when I was doing my PhD, there's a lot that was required, right? In my first year, I stayed at work at my new job where there was Wi-Fi. But I think for personal and security reasons, I could not use work Wi-Fi to do academic work, and I could not use work time to do academic work. So I had to do academic work at home, of which at home I used to face numerous challenges, particularly electricity. Oftentimes I'd get home and then the power would just go out. And then the power would come back at like 5 a.m. when I'm about to leave the house, like at like 6 a.m. So that power was sufficient, for me to just maybe like heat up water to bath and then leave the house. An additional challenge was, of course, that I did not have Wi-Fi at home, and then that data was expensive. Of course, I've given you this background. Fast forward, yes, I relocated to Cape Town in June of 2019, at the end of June. And then when I was in Cape Town, data was still expensive, right? And I was still not moneyed. And then when I eventually managed to find a place to rent, I had enough to pay the rent. But the three of us, that's my housemates and myself, did not have enough money to pay for a Wi-Fi package. So once again, there was no Wi-Fi at home, although of course we had electricity, which meant that I could do some extra work. And because I was now a full-time student, I could work both at home and, of course, on campus. What did I do? Of course, I had to work mostly on campus. So on most days, I used to just wake up, prepare myself, eat sadza and green veggies with some nice soup, and then head over to campus and work there where there was Wi-Fi. This was 2019, pre-COVID, right? Context. And then oftentimes I would come back home and then go back to campus to pull what we call an all-nighter, basically spending the whole night on campus because once again, I needed to be in a space where there was reliable Wi-Fi, whether in the library, in the teaching assistant's room, or of course in the computer labs. So yeah, those were some of my struggles when it came to what required money and the money that I got for some things. For example, money for bus tickets, money for plane tickets, and of course, I was sheltered by my aunt at some point. Now, how did I end up staying somewhere where I was like sharing a space with housemates? I stayed with my aunt, I think, for a few weeks, gaining more money from editing, and then I got an offer from a friend. Many thanks to her. I will forever be grateful. She offered to loan me money for my rent deposit. As some of you may know, in Cape Town, oftentimes you're required to pay up to like 3 months of a monthly rent as your first rent and then 2 months worth of deposit, right? So it's like 3 months worth of rent, basically. So at the time she offered and then I accepted, but I didn't want to because I didn't have a history of borrowing money and I don't borrow money like now, right? So that's one thing that I did which humbled me. Fortunately, when I started working after like 2 months, got the money and managed to pay her back. Amazing, right? Yeah, so settling in Cape Town was quite difficult because there were going to be a lot of money challenges. Some of you might have been my tatlings. I would have tutored you. I would have been your teaching assistant when I was doing my PhD. Now, the teaching assistant money, unfortunately, was only enough for my rent. So what that meant was I needed to still work on the side to make money for electricity contributions, which I did by working as a transcriber. I was fortunate that I had a stable client for transcribing because she was doing research on a long-term project. And then the money for groceries and anything else, toiletries, you name it, had to come from editing. And for whatever reason, I think in that season, God knew what to do best for me. I always had editing clients for whatever reason, like I said, which is something that has not been happening, which is something that had not been happening prior to my move to Cape Town. So I think all of this speaks to just, moving forward in faith, knowing that God will always make a plan for you. And sometimes if you don't take the leap, how are you going to know what's going to work? Because if you don't take the leap, you're going to stay where you are, and then you don't get the necessary assistance you require. So it took a lot of bravery. And I think I can safely say that after relocating to Cape Town, by the time 2020 started, I was in a stable situation financially. And that was because I managed to shift from just being a teaching assistant to also becoming a guest lecturer. And guest lecturing income was a bit higher. But then again, COVID-19 hit hard. My two housemates left. And so that meant that I had to make the monthly electricity contributions in full. I spoke to my parents about it, and fortunately my father was able to, say that, you know what, I'll try and chip in with regards to your electricity. Tell me how much you need per month, and then I'll be assisting you from time to time. Because I was completely stuck. And there was no way I was going to relocate and leave South Africa to go spend COVID-19 elsewhere. I needed to complete the PhD. So also speaking about money, that also meant that at the time I had to make a plan for the Wi-Fi because at the beginning we did not have permission to be on campus. So those all-nighters, I was staying on campus, and that strategy of going to campus very early in the morning with the stomach solidified by pap was not going to work. So I had to make the ultimate sacrifice when it came to data. Fortunately, after some time, the politics department at the University of Cape Town also made sure that they were giving us extra money, not extra money, but rather just like money for data or Wi-Fi expenses during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I really appreciated that. I did not have money for extracurricular activities. People see me now participating in races, participating in hikes and all of that, going for camps. Those were not even thoughts because I just could not. So yeah, I had my season of struggle, and when you see me celebrating, just know that this comes from a place where I had emptiness and could not achieve or participate in particular activities, but I can now do the same. Now, I think that I've spoken about everything that I wanted to say with regards to the financial challenges I experienced. So, yeah, sometimes you have to make a plan. The second one was career sacrifice. So I started working for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade in Zimbabwe in January 2018. And of course, that coincided with me registering for the first year of my PhD. I was learning in terms of my new job, and I was also learning in terms of my PhD proposal. Working on my PhD proposal during that year was extremely difficult. I think I wrote about 2 or 3 drafts in the first year, and my supervisor was not pleased. So what I decided was that I would work on a 4th draft that I would submit at the beginning of 2019, which would be my second year. And then my supervisor acknowledged it. He said it was better. So I had to go forward and present that proposal. So my proposal defense went very well, and I'd vowed to myself to say that if I pass that proposal defense, I was not going to, continue with my job. So I immediately then went back to work and submitted my resignation letter, 3 months notice, etc., etc. So I sacrificed a career in international relations, a career in diplomacy for a PhD that, of course, at the time did not guarantee anything in terms of career prospects. I do have a video where I speak about, why I regret quitting my dream job, and I'm going to post up a link here as well as in the description box so that you can watch it if you've not done so already. Okay, so I think for me what that move meant was I went from a situation of permanence to a situation of precarity. Permanence in the sense that I had passed the first year at work, which meant that I was out of probation and I was confirmed as a member of the ministry. And that is the time when I decided, no, I'm just going to go and become a PhD student and we'll see what happens after 3 years. And then it meant that I was shifting from a condition of certainty to a condition of uncertainty. Certainty in the sense that, if I stayed in the ministry, worked for some few years, I would in future get posted to a diplomatic mission, do my time, 2 decades, 3 decades, and perhaps one day become an ambassador. And, the rest is history. But of course, I was going to this PhD, which meant that I would come out, of course, as a holder of a doctor of philosophy in political science, but anything else after that was not guaranteed. And then I also left diplomacy, which is, I think, what we can define as the industry side of what I had studied for my master's and my honors and undergraduate degrees, in international relations, public policy, and gender studies. And I was shifting for an academic qualification, which again was not a type of industry. And while a PhD could lead to a role in academia, many of you would know that it is very difficult to get a job as a lecturer or even to just get a permanent role in academia. There's a lot of temporary roles in academia. You can be a PhD candidate, you can be an associate researcher, you can be an ad hoc lecturer and never get tenure, never get confirmed as a full-time member of staff, like on a permanent basis. So that was a huge career risk. Now, this takes us to the third point. My third point today is I wish that I had career coaching. And the absence of career coaching meant that I went into the PhD with myopia, lack of knowledge that was limiting to a large extent. And my supervisor was someone who had been an academic, I think, since like the early 90s. So that's not a person you would expect to have working knowledge of how best to carve out your career pathway as a PhD student. All he could do in terms of to the best of his ability was, of course, the academic supervision and trying to nurture me into a future academic. But then, of course, he was not in a position to give me an academic job because that's just not how things work. So yeah, I wish that I had had a career coach who would help me to structure ways in which I could apply myself to a field of interest or a field related to my thesis, and to do so while pursuing my PhD. So my side hustles were editing, transcribing, and research consulting in academia, which meant that everything I was doing during my PhD became extremely academic. And then what it also meant was that I did not get to network with people that were working in a wide range of sectors. Of course, I participated in events where there were civil society organizations. I participated in events that included people from think tanks, but I don't think I did so strategically. When we were in those spaces, we were more of just like intellectual peers, and it was within the context of academic conferences more than anything else. And then to make things worse, like I said, I started my PhD in 2018, moved to Cape Town 2019, COVID hits 2020, everything is locked down. So everything I'm talking about in terms of like networking, your conferences, your seminars had to go online. And that did not create a conducive environment for organic networking that one would otherwise have experienced without, of course, the challenges that were imposed by COVID-19. So, I mean, going back, it's not like I can change that. We were all going through the most. And I think to a large extent, there were very few spaces that I participated in because of also the data situation. Yes, I could afford data because we got an allowance, but I was relying on data and not Wi-Fi. So I actually had a huge expense when it came to data, and I had to pick my struggles. Microsoft Teams was expensive. Zoom was a bit less expensive, but still I had to choose what to attend, what to participate in or be part of. So yeah, I'm going back to the money because I told you, remember, like everything goes back to money. So yeah, even career coaching. I have a career coach now. I don't afford like regular consultations, but I afford a few consultations. But I didn't afford that at all when I was doing my PhD, and I didn't even know that, I could seek the services of career coaches. What campus provides in terms of student wellness is usually, counselors or therapists, and oftentimes, actually, to a large extent, they don't deal with academic challenges that PhD candidates go through. I'm realizing that this video is getting too long and the camera was heating up, so I had to take a forced break. So, I was talking about how the university did not have PhD specific support services. So, yes, they student wellness, they have psychologists, counselors, and whatnot, but I never managed to talk to someone who could give me PhD specific advice. Of course, I had a supervisor, but I think with a supervisor, it's so academic that, you write, they read, they give you recommendations, you go to them, you speak about some of the challenges you're experiencing, maybe with your literature review or theories or the case studies, and then they share from their wisdom. You ask them if you can record so that, you can also go back home and re-listen to what they were saying. But someone to go through different stages with, who knows what it means to hold space emotionally for someone that's going through a PhD. I think that universities need that. Even the UCT Career Services, for example, are speaking about the need for a career coach because they have broad or generalized approaches, which means that if you're a PhD student, you don't necessarily have someone that can give you that career muscle. Anyway, let us move on to the next challenge. COVID-19 itself was a major challenge. Unprecedented times, we'd never gone through that. And I had initially chosen not to go home. Now borders had closed, so I couldn't even leave South Africa anyway. So I was alone. My housemates had left. And I spent a lot of time at home because of a lot of restrictions on people, moving outside, especially at the beginning. So sometimes I would sleep a lot during the day, experience some form of like hallucinations because I'm talking to myself essentially, I guess, in my sleep, or I'm starting to create scenarios of me communicating, whether with myself or with my thesis or with people back home because I'm thinking about them. Remember the limitations on data? I don't recall having a video call with any of my family members during the height of COVID. Sometimes WhatsApp calls, but I think that was even rare because on their end as well, they had data and Wi Fi specific limitations. So that really hit me hard. And I struggled also with my research. So when COVID-19 hit, I had done some of my interviews. Now, COVID, imposed restrictions. The university was generous. They allowed us to do our interviews via phone calls or via Zoom and what have you. So I had some interviews via proper calling people. I remember I had to call people in Lesotho by buying real airtime to also cater for their own challenges because they did not have reliable data or Wi-Fi. So I had to do direct calls. And somewhere on WhatsApp because those people only had enough data or Wi-Fi for WhatsApp. Somewhere on Zoom and somewhere on MS Teams. It was just a mess. So the quality of my interviews was very different. So quality in terms of how I would interact with the people with ease. I remember the phone call, they were worried about my airtime finishing. I was probably also worried, but I was like, rest assured, we can do this. And then also, I think I struggled in terms of just being alone without family or a semblance of family. Friends were in their own cocoons, and my family was also where they were dealing with their own challenges. I was where I was, alone, solo for that matter. So I think that leads us to the next point. My next point is peer support. I personally never had struggle buddies, so I don't have close friends who were pursuing PhDs at the same rate that I was when I was doing mine. I remember there's one person I met when I had just started, but they were ahead, so they were also trying to finish fast. They couldn't hold space for me, I couldn't hold space for them adequately. And then I had peers who had started at the same time as me, but were taking things a bit slower. They'd given themselves 4 to 6 or 7 years to finish. I wanted to finish in 3 years. So I didn't have struggle buddies that I could go through each stage with. So I was also alone in that regard. And you don't have to see a supervisor weekly. I saw mine, of course, in my capacity as teaching assistant as well as an assistant lecturer. But the idea of doing PhD research is that you are gaining independence as an intellectual. So I spent a lot of time also lonely in an academic sense. And what that also meant was that I had to look elsewhere, and elsewhere at the time was online. I remember my first encounter with academic YouTubers was with Tara Brabazon as well as Amina Yonis. And fortunately, our Vice Chancellor at the University of Cape Town at the time, Professor Mamuketi Pakeng, had her own series where she shared intellectual insights on how to conduct research at different levels, master's and PhD, and also engaged in conversations that were focused on academic challenges. So I think for me, those were really helpful. And it was amazing finally meeting her also at my graduation in person and also participating in her series as one of the interviewees at some point. So I think that really helped. Those people probably didn't know how much they were helping me, but having those go-to spaces virtually was also helpful. So hopefully I have been providing a platform that helps some of you. I think this is also my way of giving back and also my way of sharing from the little that I know, because I'm still a young doctor. And yeah, you need struggle buddies. In the absence of struggle buddies, let's say you are not studying on campus, or you're studying on campus, you're not able to find people within your department, maybe try and see if you could find people within the same faculty or even in other faculties that you can be struggle buddies with. But I don't think it's a train smash if you don't have any. These are some challenges that people face. They're unique, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to excel or meet your targets. I finished mine in 3 years as per target, despite all these other challenges. Now, coming to the sixth issue, I am widely perceived as a superwoman. Maybe I perceive myself as such as well. Firstborn daughter energy, hey. So I'm a super student to my supervisor. He is, like, I trust you, you are reliable, you can do this even on your own, you've got capacity. When you're struggling, I know that you will keep pushing and strive for excellence. I have parents that are like, oh, super daughter, we know you can do this. For sure, you're about to finish. What are you still working on? We know you, Queen of Excellence. I was a super friend. So my friends will be cheering me on from a standpoint of, girl, you can do this. Girl, you've got this. Because I didn't have friends at the time who had PhDs. And I didn't have friends at the time, again, like I said, who were struggle buddies. So everyone was just cheering you on. Amazing, right? But I don't know if I can call it imposter syndrome, because I didn't have that. I was high on my own supply of motivation and optimism that I was going to pass. I think we saw it for those of you that were following me at the time. In hindsight, I'm like, why was I sharing about doing a PhD? What if I had failed? So even me sharing during those milestones means I was overconfident. And that superhuman identity, I think, helped to a large extent. But sometimes it led to me feeling like if I fail here, then I've got nothing else for me in the future. So that led to me not taking long breaks when they were needed. I was always in work mode. And I think that also even contributed to me saying, I need to finish regardless of COVID. I cannot die of COVID-19 without a PhD. If I'm going to die of COVID, let it be that I would have submitted and I'm graduating posthumously. Like, I was that serious about having the doctor title. I also know that I didn't immerse myself in a wide range of social spaces also for the same reason. During my honors, I struggled to be part of social spaces. In my masters, those were non-existent completely. I even ended up quitting some of the engagements I'd been involved in as extracurricular activities. And with my PhD, I think I was still more or less the same person, and saying to myself, you cannot date while pursuing a PhD, amongst other factors. So, yeah, being a superhuman is something else. I think that it is a complex I'm currently experiencing as a person that has recently, returned to academia as a lecturer. But that, of course, is a conversation for another day where I'm going to be sharing, of course, about what it means for me to be back in academia. Otherwise, thank you for watching up until this point. I highly appreciate your support. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe if you've not done so yet, and obviously to share for wider reach. It is, of course, goodbye for now.